So you have a new book and you want to teach it to your new class in the fall. Or perhaps you've been given a new book and you are now instructed to teach this new book in the fall. So how do you go about reading a book that you plan to teach? This is what we're going to look at today with the book Seedfolks, such a good book. And I just kind of wanted to settle into this reading time today with you, just to do like a reading vlog, but to make it more helpful, I guess, and to provide a little more value than just me sitting around here reading. So as we get going, I'm gonna read, but I'm also gonna pepper in ways to help you learn how to, or remember, or just encourage you to read a book that you plan on teaching. My top recommendation for you for how to read a book that you plan on teaching is to look for repetition. Where does repetition come in? Where does it come in the plot? Where does it come in character development? Where does it come in using literary devices? That is the anchor for every single text you can use. Where is there repetition? Because that also then begs the question, how is it significant? Every time something is repeated, more significance gets added, and you can talk with your students about that. And that's something, though, that you can look for as you're reading something that you plan on teaching. Hi, Purple. Are you going to help us today? Do you want to say hi to the people? He says, no, I want to bark to get all the deer away and the bear that's been coming around. So first things first is perhaps you've read the book and now you're going to be reading again with the filter or the lens of a teacher. And so things that you're going to be paying attention to, obviously, are the plot, but also any kind of literary device that pops in. The most common things you'll probably find are symbolism, of course, examples of things like metaphor and simile. Anytime any of that pops up, make a note of it on your notepad that you're reading. So I always start with my book. I also start with a pencil, and then I have a notebook ready to go so that I can make notes as I'm reading. I also, you can see, have lots of post-it notes, and this is helpful for me, but not my preferred method. My preferred method is to underline and annotate within the book itself. So some people are really against that, but I am very much for annotating within the book. Within the plot, how is the novel structured? Is it in parts? Is it by chapter? Does each chapter have the same narrator, etc.? Are there any scenes that connect to each other? So in some of the Shakespeare plays I've taught, there are mirrored scenes where in like the first act, a scene is kind of repeated almost exactly in a later act. So does that happen in this book? How did those scenes connect? So we're always looking for ways to connect things that happen throughout the book. That's a great way to look at it, through different scenes. So like I said, you're going to be looking for the plot, you're going to be looking for literary devices, you're going to be looking for characterization. We're also looking for any foreshadowing. So this is, again, looking just at plot. How is it structured? Are there any mirrored or repeated scenes? And when does foreshadowing come into play? With characters and characterization, again, we're looking at, is this first person, third person? How is the narrator telling the story? Are they reliable or not? We're looking at what type of language are they using? Are they speaking in like colloquial terms, or something more familiar, something informal? Or are they a little more proper? So what's their vibe, basically? Along with that, we can study dialogue and look at how dialogue is used to advance the plot or provide characterization. Two things dialogue should be doing every single time, or one of those two things is something dialogue should be doing every single time. We're also looking for, I guess, another big one is any time there's repetition, mark it down. So one way I like to do it is you only find repetition after you've read a little bit. So repetition, page 7, and so I have that on my chapter 4. Let's say on chapter 4 it's page 32. So on 32 I write 7, and then on page 7 I write 32. And so I'm always doing that. And then again later on in the series, or in the chapters, maybe in chapter 10, that repetition comes back. What two numbers am I going to be putting on that chapter 10 page? Page 7, page 32. So I, as a teacher, know that it's coming down the line, and I can help to prepare my students for it the first time the repetition occurs. Another way to read a book that you plan on teaching is to consider any historical context that needs to be provided. Are you going to front load this for your class, or are you going to just kind of teach it as teach the context as you go along? Sometimes you do need to do a little bit more context, and sometimes you just do it as you go. Like in Seedfolks, there's a mention of Miles Davis, and I think not very many of my students know who Miles Davis is. So maybe I start that day's lesson with a little jazz, and we listen to it and we write about it. You know, how does this make us feel? In what way does this connect to the book? You know, stuff like that. And that helps students understand a little bit more. And again, because this is a 7th grade class that I'm targeting this for, the reading is not the hard part, but understanding that there are different levels to reading and understanding how to look at a story with different tools in your toolkit, like symbolism or illusion. That's what this novel unit is all about for me. So that's a lot. I'm sure there's more. Those are the first few things that come to mind. It's kind of exciting to share this because unless you teach this, you don't, it's like a hidden skill, I guess. All of those things that I just mentioned are great ways to start. Plot, how's it structured? What are the literary devices, and where's the repetition? Start there. If everything I just said is too much, use those 3 big ones. And it will help guide you. Of course, your pacing will change once your lessons actually get going. You'll see if you can go faster or you need to go a little slower depending on who your students are and what their levels are. And that's what makes it so exciting. But reading with a plan to teach and having a plan in mind before you start teaching, obviously, will help you be successful in the classroom. This is a really short book. Probably it would be considered a novella, but it's only 102, actually, yeah, it's 102 pages long. And it's just such a joyful book. So I'm gonna sit here and reread it, and hopefully I'll make some notes. This is a great book because every time you read it, you can get something new out of it. Any book you teach should have that quality. And yeah, I haven't read it in the past couple of years, so I'm excited to dive into it and meet these characters again. In this book, every chapter is a different character, and we start off with Kim. And she is going to plant something in this garden in Cleveland. So, let's read. I just finished reading Seedfolks again for, I don't know what time this is, the 7th or 8th time at least. I still got something out of it. It's so good. And it can take you about an hour to read if you just sit down and read it start to finish. So that was rejuvenating. I made some notes on this old note reading journal that I already had. Again, just drawing out some specific page numbers and such that I would probably point out when I'm teaching, but because I'm making something for you, I wanted to have some specific page numbers. So actually, if you go onto my Teachers Pay Teachers store, you'll have a chapter outline along with questions, significant literary devices, things to pay attention to help you plan to teach this new book, Seedfolks, to your students, because it is amazing. Another thing that I really love about this book that I don't know, didn't say out loud yet, is just that it connects students back to nature. And it's a really great tool to help them observe wherever they are, to help them, think about maybe the seasons and the cycles and just kind of the cyclical element of life. And especially now in a world that's so dominated by unnatural rhythms with technology and even just with lack of awareness or education or experience in the natural world. So this is a really great way to tiptoe back into that for students. And students really love it. People love nature. We're programmed to be in it. So this is a great way to, like I said, dive back into that with some young readers. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you are excited to go through. I'm gonna do some like chapter by chapter videos for Seedfolks, especially if you plan on teaching this book next year or this coming fall. I love to teach it in the fall, like I said, because it builds community. The only downside is in the northern hemisphere, that's not exactly the best time to be planting something. So a natural extension activity is to go plant something outside, but you could potentially plant maybe some daffodils around your school, or some bulbs, things that need to be cold to then bloom again in the spring. So that would be a recommendation. You might be able to get like a radish planted or something really quick. But radishes are like, I don't know, not that exciting for students usually. There are really good ways to jazz it up. Maybe your school already has a garden and you can talk to your garden teacher about how to integrate that into this study. But thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me outside as we read in the redwoods together. And until then, I'll see you next time, and happy reading.